Hello. I'm going to just go ahead and kind of introduce myself and Malika Jefferson so we can kind of kick off our first episode of our EmpowerED Pickerington Local Schools series. My name is Allison Zweifel, and I am the interim special education director. And we also have Malika Jefferson on here, who is our interim executive director of student services. So again, while we're waiting for everybody to hop on, we have that QR code that we'd like for everyone to scan and go ahead and take our pre-survey. And then at the end of our presentation here, we're going to have a post-survey. So, and for those of you again who just hopped on, this is our first series of our EmpowerED here through Pickerington Local Schools. And I'd like to welcome everybody. So the purpose of our EmpowerED series is really a resource for our special education support, where the focus is going to be on supporting families and their child here in the district. Like I said earlier, we have with us today Malika Jefferson, who's our executive director of student services, and myself, Allison Zweifel, who is the interim director of special education. As we're going along here, you'll notice that participants have been muted, but please feel free to write any questions, any concerns, any comments you have in the chat, and Malika will be answering those questions, okay? All right. And what we're going to do today is really provide everybody with an overview of what student services does and really kind of dive deeper into our special education process, okay? All right. So the mission of our department here, our special education department, is to provide each child with really a safe and inclusive learning environment. Our purpose is to ensure that students receive that free and appropriate public education regardless of their disability. When we're looking at our district goals, we know that our district goals really apply to everybody here in Pickerington, or every student, but especially they're important when we think about how we're serving students with disabilities here. The first thing I'd like to look at, our first district goal, is really how we're cultivating academic excellence with our students with disabilities. So really, for our kiddos that are on IEPs, this means personalized instruction and supports in order for them to access the curriculum and access their IEP supports. Our second district goal is talking about our modern facilities. And in terms of our special education students, this means that we have barrier-free classes, that we have sensory spaces for our students who may need that, accessible playgrounds. This could be adaptive technology or even assistive technology. In ensuring our operating efficiency with our student services department, we really maximize our district resources while making sure students are getting what is in their IEP. Okay. And again, being pillars of our community, and pursuing opportunities to engage with residents, with everybody here today. And I think that was the main purpose of our EmpowerED, is really to be able to provide those opportunities for all of us to come together, to hear your comments, and for us to kind of share out what we do here as a district in our student services department. Okay. So I think a question that we get a lot here in student services is, who are we? So we are a large department here, and we are comprised of many, many individuals. So I kind of want to take a little bit of time just to explain to everybody who makes up student services and really what their roles are. So I started with our paraprofessionals, and I did that intentionally because they're really our first line of access to our students. So our paraprofessionals are the ones in the classroom, our first line of support for the kids. They are helping implement instruction, helping to implement strategies, really just helping with the daily, day-to-day activities. Our intervention specialists are also part of our student services, and they are the ones they are certified teachers they're designing and they're delivering the instruction to your children, to our students. They are the ones oftentimes providing the accommodations, working with the gen ed teacher to bridge that gap between general education and special education. And again, providing those supports to anybody out there who may have questions about special ed. We have coordinators in our department, our special education coordinators. They are administrators in our district who are district office employees, but they are in each building. So all of our coordinators kind of travel in between buildings. And really their role is to provide that oversight and provide that guidance to building administration, teachers, students, and families. Another role of what the coordinators do is really to ensure compliance within our district as well. Our administrative assistants, really, we couldn't do our jobs without them. And their role is to help us keep things running smoothly. And they are behind the scenes people, but extremely critical to the work that we do within our department. So health services also falls under our student services, and this composes our nurses, our nurse aides, and just like the name implies, they support with our medical needs that may affect our students and their access to learning or curriculum. Also, we have our related service providers. So there is a ton of related service providers here. They are our speech language therapists, our occupational therapists, physical therapists. They could be our vision and hearing. We have lots of specialized service providers, again, that provide those specialized services to our students on IEPs. And lastly, we have our school psychologists. They're kind of related service providers. They're also administrators in the district. And their main role is to support our teams and to support students through the evaluation process. Okay. And for those who are just joining us, I know people are just kind of hopping on. Just a reminder that you can put any questions you have in the chat. Malika Jefferson is here to answer those questions as we go along. So I think just for clarity and kind of explaining to everybody, what does student services do exactly? So it's hard to capture, I think, that one thing that we do, but we know for sure that we support students and families. We make sure that each child is getting the right services so they're growing and closing that gap alongside their same age peers. Okay. We collaborate. So you just saw all the many people that make up our student services department. And we all work as a team with you, with teachers, with specialists, with outside agencies to make sure each child is getting exactly what they need per their IEP and for their education. And lastly, we serve your children and our students. So we have approximately 2,000, I think it's just a little bit over, students that are identified as students who have disabilities under that Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So I think that those three areas are in a nutshell what we do here within our student services department. So what is special education? I think when we're talking about special education, it's specially designed instruction that is formed specifically for the needs of that child. And I think the key takeaway here is that the specially designed instruction is individualized. So it is individualized for a student's specific needs. We know that special education is a service. It is not a place. I think we oftentimes will get questions about where special education occurs, and people have a notion that it may be a certain classroom or a specific school or a specific place, but it's really a set of services, not a specific place or not a specific building. Some of those services could happen in a certain classroom, but in and of itself, it is a set of services, not a place. And students can receive those services across many settings as well. The second part too, and we'll get these questions, is, does it cost anything? So no, special education is a legal right to families, and it comes at no cost to students and their families. Another thing that I think is important for families in the community to know, really, who is potentially, and I say the word potentially, but potentially eligible for special education services. So any student between the age of 3 and 22 could potentially be eligible for specially designed instruction, for an IEP. So not everybody, I want to mention, not everybody qualifies for special education. There are very clear guidelines as to who can qualify, and we're going to touch base on that a little bit further here within the slides. So anybody who meets the definition of a student with a disability could also potentially qualify. And these definitions of the disabilities, it's not a district policy. This is a federal law, again, through that IDEA law, that really governs those definitions of students with a disability. Okay. And lastly, the disability must affect a student's academic performance and require specially designed instruction. And in our next slide here, we're going to go over that a little bit more, and kind of the difference between a diagnosis that a child may have and a disability. Okay. Again, for those of you who have just hopped on, please feel free to enter any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll be sure to answer those. So moving forward here, this is probably one of the biggest areas of, I don't want to say question, but concern that we may get, phone calls that we field, that we talk to our families about. That a diagnosis does not always indicate a disability. And I want to kind of go into that a little bit more. So I broke that up here into kind of two layers that you see. I want to look to the left, where a child may come to us, or a family may come to us and say, my child has this medical diagnosis. And it's important to know that these medical diagnoses are made within that healthcare setting. So they're not, they're not made within a school setting. We are definitely not MD doctors here. So, and their set of criteria for that medical diagnosis could be their clinical assessments. They also use something called the DSM, which is a manual used for that medical diagnosis. So when we're looking at a diagnosis versus a disability, we know that an educational disability is actually made as a decision by a team within that school setting. And this is governed, it's not through that diagnostic manual, but that is governed through, again, that IDEA law, that is a federal law, that is, also then district policy that we follow. So just because a student has a medical diagnosis, it's not equivalent to that educational disability. So, for example, you could have a child who has an ADHD diagnosis, but is performing very well within the classroom, and there's no effect on their access to the curriculum or their progress. So, in that case, that may not be that educational disability, but we're going to talk about that process too moving forward. I just thought it was important to really kind of separate the difference there, so families and even teachers understand the difference between that medical piece and that educational piece. Okay. And sometimes they do go together, and that's what we're going to talk about. So what is our process in terms of special education and a child receiving special education services? So I use this image because I think that it's helpful in people kind of looking at this circle process. It's a very kind of step-by-step process as to what happens in our kind of special education world. So it almost always starts, it has to start as a referral, whether that referral is coming from a parent whether that is coming from a teacher. But the entire process kickstarts with that referral and then leads to the rest of the graphic that you're seeing here. And we're going to spend some time here going over each of these bubbles that you see here and how that looks within a school setting. Okay. So again, the first step in our special education process is that referral piece that is an official request for special education services. This could be a phone call to a principal. This could be a email that is sent to a teacher, to a school psychologist, but almost always starts with the parent reaching out. Okay. Again, may come from a parent, may come from a staff. And it's important for families to know too that once this official request is made, the district has 30 days to respond. So you may send us an email, and our timeline that comes down from that IDEA law is that we have 30 days to reply to your request. We obviously try to get that done quicker than that, but that is our legal timeline too. So moving over into evaluation and eligibility, I want to start by saying that if the district suspects a disability, we will set up a meeting. Okay. It's important for families to understand that just because that referral is made or that request for special education, if the district does not suspect a disability, they will not move forward with the evaluation. We will always reach out to families and explain our reasoning and follow that up with a written notice. But again, just important to note that request doesn't always lead to an evaluation. So in talking about this slide, we are assuming that that request is going to lead to that evaluation. And what we start doing then is we would set up a meeting that we call a planning meeting to really discuss parents, your concerns, discuss teacher concerns about the child, and obtain your written parent consent to begin the evaluation process. That evaluation process is determined by the team in that planning meeting. For example, if you as a parent come to us with a concern about your child's reading, and the teacher is also concerned about that, we're going to do some formal reading assessments. If there's no concern about math or about writing, that wouldn't be something that we would necessarily evaluate. Okay. So what we do in terms of the evaluation is really dictated by what the concerns are in the area of weakness that we're seeing. Once the team agrees to those assessments and what they're going to do in that evaluation, that's when our school psychologist is, working with that child, working with that teacher, writing that evaluation summary. And we will then come together in what we call an evaluation team, an ETR meeting, evaluation team report meeting, where we as a team, you, the parent, teachers, your coordinators, your school psychologists will come together, discuss those results, and we as a team will determine that eligibility for special education services. And I put that arrow of 60 days down there so families understand that timeline as well, that from the time that we do take the written parent consent in that planning meeting to the day that we come together and determine eligibility, could be up to a 60-day process. I think I'm a little bit partial, obviously, but we have phenomenal, teams here and school psychologists, and typically does not take that full 60 days, but it could, depending on a lot of factors. So just wanted to have that out there so parents again kind of understand what laws we follow through IDEA as a district and how that affects this evaluation process. Okay. And again, while we're transitioning slides to those of you who just hopped on, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box, okay? Once a team determines, let me back up here, determines eligibility. So if a child does qualify for special education services, we're then going to hold another meeting a subsequent meeting, to draft what we call an IEP, which is an individualized education program. A lot of you are probably familiar with what IEP stands for, but we oftentimes get a lot of questions about the parts of an IEP and what it exactly means, especially for families that are just going through this process initially. So again, if they qualify for special education services, an IEP is developed by the team, and the team will consist of the same people that were in the evaluation team as well. Okay. The team really comes together and drafts all of those goals and accommodations. So all of these are taken directly from the results of the evaluation team report. So kind of look at the ETR as really the guiding force of this IEP. So we have all of this data, all of these results from interventions, and then we're going to compile it into an individualized document for your child, for our students. So I want to note too that part of the team and part of why we're starting this EmpowerED series is really to continue to get parent input. So you as parents are a required member of our team. You are a vital part of our team. You know your child best. So your input is valued and greatly appreciated throughout this whole process. Okay. And my lights just went out in here if you just saw it get dark. So, okay. So when we're talking through our IEP meeting, oftentimes after we've developed the goals, we have talked about our accommodations. We then talk about our placement, or how are we going to serve your child? Where are we going to work on these goals? And part of IDEA as well, that law which governs what we do here in student services, talks about what we call LRE, a student's least restrictive environment. And I want to put this graphic here. I'm a visual person, so I appreciate that everybody else will like this graphic too. But when we're looking at LRE, there's really a continuum of services, and we as a district and student services, we have an obligation to educate your child in that least restrictive environment. So kind of starting from left to right, when we look at different environments, we obviously know that all students are, including special education students, are general education students first. Okay. And I say that because all of our students have access to the curriculum, to that general curriculum. And our goal always is to serve these goals, provide these supports and accommodations in that general education classroom. There are times that students may need more supports, where they need a smaller classroom. They need maybe a reduction in noise. They need a more sensory friendly environment. That could be in what we call our resource rooms or our special education classrooms. After that, we may have students who have even more significant supports, or require more significant supports than what a public school could provide. That's when we would start talking about perhaps a special school or an alternative school for your child, for our students. Now, these last three, special schools, homebound, and hospital, these are obviously our most restrictive and are not very common. But again, I wanted to kind of put this continuum of services that we, through student services, provide for our students. But mainly, you're going to see your child, special education student, served within that general education classroom and or that special ed classroom. Okay. And keep in mind that those services could change too. So part of the IEP process is it's a fluid document. So we come together and determine that again as a team. Okay. Okay. When we're talking about specially designed instruction, again, I mentioned earlier that all of our special education students are general education students first. Okay. So in general instruction, every student in that gen ed classroom is getting the same instruction, right? Some may get a little, you may have more supports for one student in there than another. One student may have more questions than another student, but in general, everybody is getting that same content, that same instruction. And their progress in there would be measured through grade level standards. Okay. So keep in mind, this is the instruction that every child within our district gets. Our students that are on IEPs get IEP instruction. So that really is our specially designed instruction. Our specially designed instruction, which is what we provide for our students on IEPs who have goals. It's tailored to an individual student's need. So if, for example, if they are, working on a novel, maybe their reading level is at a fourth or a fifth grade level, we're going to make sure that that IEP instruction is on their independent level, is data driven from the information within their evaluation team report. Okay. And we measure the progress here through their IEP goals. So we know that special ed kids are going to get both. They're going to get that general instruction, and they're also going to get that specially designed instruction, that IEP instruction. Okay. Again, any questions, make sure you're putting in there and putting it in the chat box, and Malika can help answer any questions you may have. So again, part of that whole IEP process circle graphic that I showed you earlier is an annual review. So once a child's IEP is developed, that the team agrees on the goals, agrees on the accommodations, we know that this IEP has to be reviewed at least once a year. And I want to tell parents that if you have concerns or questions, you do not need to wait until that IEP is up again. Please reach out to the intervention specialists, the coordinator, building administrators to call or to convene an IEP team meeting if you have any concerns within kind of that process. But when we meet for the annual review, we talk about quite a few things, but I wanted to capture, I think, four of the most important things that we do in the annual review. The first thing is really to discuss progress. So how did your child do on the last year's goals? That really kind of kickstarts the discussion and leads to developing new goals. Okay. We talk about your child's needs. We will address what supports seem to be helping, maybe what isn't helping, and what needs to change. And we will then discuss new goals. So these new goals are not, they are taken directly from data that we have from previous progress from your child and indicate really what they should be working on for the course of that IEP for the next year. And services, again, really talking about that specially designed instruction, maybe related services or therapies that your child may get, and accommodations. And sometimes those need to change. Again, our IEPs are a fluid document, and maybe your child is presenting with one area of weakness last year that we addressed, and they're doing very well with that, and we're going to choose to focus on something different. So it does change through time, and that's why it's important for us to conduct those annual reviews and make sure that everything is still the right fit. But I think, again, the key takeaway here is really to know that you as a parent can ask to convene that IEP team at any time. Okay. All right. I think this question, in doing this for a while, I've observed parents in meetings and, get questions sometimes. What do we need to bring anything? What do we need to do? And how can we help? So what we think is helpful as a district is really for you to kind of gather that information about your child and bring to the meetings. This information could be your observations at home. It could be maybe results of a recent medical evaluation. It could be information that you have from your doctor, a change of medication. Um, could be maybe there's been a change in the home. Maybe a dog has passed away. We get a lot of kids that, believe it or not, that really affects them within the classroom. So the more you can tell us about your child, the more we can collaborate and work together and help your kiddo in the classroom. Another thing that I like for parents to do when they come to meetings is kind of draft that vision for your child. Within the annual review IEP meetings, there is a section there for future planning. And this is really where you, as the parent, share with us your short term goals for your student, your long term goals, any concerns you have, any wins that you want to share. We don't want to just hear the things you're concerned about. We want to hear the good stuff too, because it helps us to really understand your child and build that relationship with them within the classroom. So come with that information and your vision of what you want for your student. Again, you know your child best. So what seems to you, may be something obvious. We may not know. We may not know that they have, a fear of, storms, or, their favorite color is blue. Those things help us as a team to really understand kind of what helps your child tick, and again helps us to best educate them. And lastly, know that you are an equal partner in this. So, and that's why I purposely picked that graphic. That there's no head of meetings. There's no one, at the front seat there. We really are a team, and our goal is to work together to create that IEP, those goals and services that are going to be best for your kid, not all the kids, just for your kid, to make sure that they're growing and really closing that educational gap. Okay. Parents also ask, and I see, how are ways that we can communicate with their general education teachers? How can I understand all of these different platforms, Google Classroom, Infinite Campus, this teacher's website? So kind of giving some of those strategies, I think, for how we're developing those positive relationships with one another, so we can all kind of be on that same playing field in um, creating success for your child. And the first thing is, we ask of teachers, we ask of parents, really to always assume that positive intent. I think in our world today, there's so much going on, and we see so much negative that it's easy to assume sometimes the worst. But really approaching all of these relationships with the understanding that your child's educators share the same goal that you do, and that really is for your child to be successful here in Pickerington. The one commonality that I think we all have is your kid. Educators get in this because they love kids and they love helping them grow. So always assuming that positive intent, and helping us prepare for meetings. Like I said in our last slide, is, it's a formal IEP team meeting where we're coming with a lot of data. We're coming with that baseline data of, how is your child reading, how are they writing, how is their math, how is their maybe behavior, their anxiety, or their executive functioning. But we really need your input too. So any information, any documents that you have that are going to help the team, please bring those, and make sure that you're coming with that clear list of your goals and your concerns for your child. Because the last thing we want as a district and in our meetings is for you to go away from these meetings not feeling that your concerns were heard, or any issues were raised. So please bring those. Where we can't read everybody's mind. So what you think may be obvious, we may not know. So don't be afraid to write a list and go through it, kind of just get like a checklist. Here's my concern, let's address it. And that is one way, I think, to help us help your child in our IEP meetings. And all of us communicating consistently too. I think I'll get a lot of parents who are asking for strategies to communicate with multiple teachers. So I always encourage everybody right on to kind of set that communication plan with general education teachers, with any of those service providers, and with your special education team manager. We call it a TOR, a teacher of record, but just to open those lines of clear communication throughout the school year. And lastly, I think share those good things with us. Like I mentioned earlier, with a world where we tend to hear the bad. It's very it's a breath of fresh air to have parents come to us, not necessarily with a problem, but with a win of their child. It could have been, maybe they made an Eagle Scout outside of school. Maybe they, got selected at PYA for a team. Maybe they hung out with their friend for a weekend and really, crushed some of their social skills that they've been working on. Any of those positive things are really helpful for us to know, I think, as a team. And just actively sharing your observations about your kid and any successful strategies or routines at home that we could also implement at school. Okay. So we went ahead. I know Malika is going to enter these links in our chat. So you as parents can, or anybody else here, teachers, anybody who's on this today, can look at our Pickerington Student Services webpage. A lot of it will talk about our mission, our goals, our district goals, some of the things that I went through, but it's also going to give you those resources of what if, right? What if you have a question about this, or if you have a question about the process? There's going to be information there and how you get a hold of us. Malika's also going to link our special education timelines, which is really that reference guide for families. So if you have questions about where you are within that special education referral process and can't get a hold of somebody right away, go ahead and check out the reference guide. And then also we've made a list of resources for families of students with disabilities that you can click on. Okay. And lastly, if you have the time, I know it's probably about dinner time for a lot of you, and some of you may just be getting home from work and getting on here. But if you were able to listen to the series today, if you could get on and do a post survey, that would be awesome. I think that will help us in guiding these our resource series as we move forward. This is our first one, so you are my guinea pigs. I am honored to be here and glad that you guys could pop on and kind of hear a little bit about Pickerington Local Schools Student Services. And please be on the lookout for future series. Our goal is to do these once a month, again, where we can all come together and kind of be pillars of the community with one another. So I really appreciate everybody being here today, and please reach out to me directly or anyone else in the district if you have any questions. Thank you all so much, and everyone have a good evening.